Last week I did a video on how expensive it was for us to buy a treated 6x6 and how we ended up making our own 6x6s. If you have not seen that video, I'll leave a link up above. After reading the comments, I learned a lot about the industry, and there's a lot of really wise people out there with a lot of knowledge. Reading the comments, it was a common theme that lumber was extremely expensive, but there was a couple of comments that kind of struck me as odd. I'm a logger and I'm still getting paid the same. That really didn't make sense to me. You would think that everybody would make more if the product sold for more. Well, that's just not the case. I read an article saying that logs were bringing the same amount now as they did 20 years ago. So the question that came up in my mind is, who is making the money? You guys stick with me and I'll explain what I found. As an amateur sawyer and logger, I can tell you it takes a lot to get a log from the woods to the sawmill to a board. It's tough work. I know I didn't have a true respect for it until I started doing it myself. So the lumber you're seeing at a box store or your local lumber yard has been from the landowner to a logger to a sawyer who packed it up and shipped it on a semi-truck to a store. And then the store sells it. Now somewhere along that line, somebody is making a killing. Now stick with me, it's not who you think. The one common theme I hear in the forums and the posts that I read is that the sawyers, the loggers, the truck drivers, the factory workers that work in the sawmills, they're not making any more money. They do make some more overtime, but it's nowhere near the kind of impact to account for the prices we see in today's market. With the price of lumber and construction materials, you would think that the people who own the logs and are selling the logs, the landowners, would be making money hand over fist. That's not the case, and this is why. During the late 1970s and early 80s, there was a farming devastation where the family farm just absolutely was falling apart due to low crop prices. Hundreds of thousands of family farms were foreclosed on, and in the mid-80s, after some protests, a bill was passed.
First, I want to thank Secretary Block and all the members, those with us today, and those who worked so hard on this but couldn't be here. Thank you all for the Herculean effort you put forth on behalf of America's farmers.
This bill encouraged farmers to stop planting food crops. There were several different variations of the programs put forth, and one of them would subsidize the farmers to take the crop rotation out and plant trees. Much of the farmland of this time was originally in trees, so this had not only benefit of raising the prices of the crop, but it also had an environmental impact. While good and meeting several of its goals, the program went on entirely too long. During this program, over 20 million acres of land were planted in timber. Today, there are millions of more acres of land planted in timber than there were in the 1980s. Intuitively, you would think this would cause the price to go down, but that's not the case. Raw timber prices are down and are at probably the lowest price that they have been in decades. Even though the price of lumber is at an all-time high, landowners are not the ones that are winning big. Many conscientious landowners planted these trees using them for a retirement plan. And now that it's time, the trees are maturing and it's time to sell the trees off for retirement, they're bringing basically less than they sold for when they were planting them back in the 1980s. So if the landowner's not getting rich, who's getting rich? The price of lumber goes up and down, and this is due to many factors, but the primary factor is the housing market and how many houses are being built. So if there's a housing boom, then obviously the price of lumber goes up. But if there is a crash like there was in 2008, then the price of the lumber drops dramatically. After the 2008 bust, the banks quit lending money, and then therefore people couldn't build new homes, and then the price of lumber fell. The price of lumber stayed stagnant up until about 3 years ago, and then there was a moderate housing boom, and construction, took off at a moderate pace, and the price of lumber rose gradually and in accordance with the boom, but nothing to explain the prices that we are seeing now. Because the sawmills were able to keep up with the moderate gain over the last 3 years, there was no rush to build new sawmills. They were able to keep up with the wood needs. The pulp mills, the sawmills, they are all able to keep up with the demand that was needed. And then along came COVID, and everybody went home. And the box stores such as Lowe's or the home improvement stores, Home Depot, they stayed open as essential. And so everybody decided it was time to do all the home projects. Now, this doesn't seem like a lot all at once, but when you take the entire population of the country and they all make a trip to the box wood store all at the same time, it basically wiped out our supply chain of lumber. So we've figured out that the people that are cutting the timber, the people that are delivering the timber, the people that own the land are not making more money. In fact, if you count for inflation, they're making less now than they did in the 1980s. When I see the prices at the box stores such as Lowe's, Home Depot, or your Menards or any of these vendors out there, my natural instinct would be to want to villainize the seller. And the reality of it is that these box stores, they buy a product for a price and then they raise it up a margin to pay for a percentage, like a 15% gain, and they have to pay their employees, their insurance, their overhead, their electricity, all the things that goes into selling these, they have to pay it out of that margin. So yes, they are a profitable company, but it wouldn't behoove them to raise the price, one vendor to raise the price up higher than another, because then you'll drive the customers to your competitor. So the margin is pretty much stabilized for all of the lumber yards. They are all making basically the same amount. They're buying it all about the same amount. So if it's not the big box stores that are making these huge profits, who is making the money? The large sawmills and the wood product manufacturers are making a killing. There are literally thousands of small sawmill companies across the United States and Canada, and these companies are not the ones we're talking about, but there are 5 very large sawmill companies and wood product manufacturers that are in control of a huge portion of the lumber supply chain. And this is where the problem and their profit lies. The 5 big ones are Georgia Pacific, Interform, West Fraser, Sierra Pacific Industries, and Weyerhaeuser's. Georgia Pacific and Sierra Pacific are both privately held companies, and we can't see the details of their profit, but we can see the detail of the other 3, which are publicly traded, and we can infer by the other 3 that Georgia Pacific and Sierra Pacific are doing well. Weyerhaeuser has a $681 million profit in their first quarter, and that's a 220% increase over last year's same time. West Fraser's results are even more astounding. They had an 81% sales increase over the already extremely high sales increase of last quarter. In the first quarter of 2020, West Fraser made $9 million profit. And in the first quarter of 2021, they made $665 million profit. I can keep going, but I believe this answers the question of who is making the money. It is the large sawmills and large wood product producers. Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this with me. And if you have any comments, please leave it in the comment section below. We look forward to answering any comments, and anything that that you know better, please leave a comment. I wish you would also take this time to subscribe to our channel, and you can watch us do sawmill and tractor work, building our future. God bless. Have a great day.